Welcome to the all-new Hoop Nova, your ultimate source for everything basketball.
Russell Westbrook has retired after 18 seasons in the NBA, played for 7 different teams. He was the league MVP in 2017 and leaves the game as the all-time leader in triple-doubles with 209.
Future Hall of Famer, top 5 greatest point guard of all time. When you talk about Russell Westbrook, we're talking about one of the all-time greats.
Russell Westbrook retired from the NBA on Wednesday, and somehow, the loudest player of his generation chose to say almost nothing. That might be the most fitting ending imaginable for a career that was never quiet. Westbrook announced his retirement through a cinematic video narrated by Michael B. Jordan. The video takes fans through 18 years of his career, the triple-doubles, the MVP, the highs, the criticism, and everything that came after basketball. But then, at the very end, Jordan asks Westbrook a simple question. Now that you've decided to walk away on your own terms, what are you most proud of? And Russ never answers. Not one word. For a player known for his emotions, his intensity, his interviews, his celebrations, and his legendary reactions, the silence was almost more powerful than anything he could have said. It felt like Westbrook had already told us everything he needed to tell us over the last 18 years. Sometimes, you don't realize you're watching the final chapter until it's already over. And now, for Russell Westbrook, it is. That's why this retirement is different. Usually, when a superstar retires, the final years of their career have already taken away some of their relevance. The player isn't the same, the production drops, and eventually the league moves on. You could make that argument about Westbrook too. His final seasons weren't anything like his MVP campaign in Oklahoma City. He had become a veteran trying to find the right role, and his production no longer matched the enormous reputation he built during his prime. But there's one major detail that makes this retirement much more interesting. Russell Westbrook still had NBA opportunities. According to reporting after his retirement announcement, Westbrook had offers from the Sacramento Kings and Washington Wizards this offseason. He simply decided he didn't want either one, and that completely changes the story. Before this, it was easy to assume nobody wanted Russell Westbrook anymore. The phone wasn't ringing, the league had moved on, and retirement was the only option left. But apparently, that wasn't the case. Teams called. Opportunities existed. Westbrook looked at them and decided that walking away was better than continuing under those circumstances. That's a much more complicated decision than simply being forced out of the NBA. The Washington opportunity, in particular, is interesting because it potentially offered Westbrook a chance to reunite with Anthony Davis while taking on a veteran role behind Trae Young. Washington is also trying to build towards something in the Eastern Conference. For a player like Westbrook, it could have been a chance to continue his career without needing to be the superstar he once was. But he didn't take it. Sacramento was the other reported option, but that situation wasn't exactly perfect either. The Kings were coming off a brutal 22-win season and had added another young guard. So for a 37-year-old former MVP, the question becomes obvious. Was another season of basketball really worth it if the role wasn't going to resemble the career he had built? And maybe that's the most important part of this entire story. The offers existed, but they weren't offers for the Russell Westbrook that fans remember. They weren't asking him to be the unstoppable athlete who averaged a triple-double, won MVP, and controlled games every night. They were asking him to accept a much smaller role. And after 18 seasons, Westbrook apparently decided that he had nothing left to prove. Because whatever you think about the final years of his career, the resume is undeniable. Westbrook finishes his career with 1,311 games, averaging 20.9 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 8 assists. He retires 5th all-time in NBA assists, behind only John Stockton, Chris Paul, Jason Kidd, and LeBron James. He's also 14th on the NBA's all-time scoring list with more than 27,000 points. Those numbers alone tell you how long and productive his career really was. But then you get to the statistic that will probably define Russell Westbrook forever: triple-doubles. In 2016-17, Westbrook became the first player since Oscar Robertson to average a triple-double over an entire NBA season. He put up 31.6 points, 10.7 rebounds, and 10.4 assists per game while winning the MVP award. At the time, people genuinely questioned whether another player would ever be able to repeat what he had done. Westbrook eventually went on to record triple-doubles at a rate that made the accomplishment look almost normal. He became the all-time leader in triple-doubles, turning one of the rarest statistical achievements in basketball into something associated almost exclusively with his name. And yes, there will always be arguments about Westbrook's legacy. Some people will remember the inefficient shooting, the turnovers, the playoff disappointments, and the difficult fit he had on certain teams. Others will remember the explosiveness, the relentless effort, the MVP season, the triple-doubles, and the fact that he played every possession like it mattered. Both versions are part of the story, but maybe that's why his retirement video was so powerful. Russell Westbrook didn't need another speech. He didn't need to defend his career. He didn't need to explain the criticism or convince anyone that he belonged. He simply walked away on his own terms. After 18 years of making noise, Russ ended his NBA career with silence. And somehow, that silence said everything. Sometimes the ending isn't about what you say. Sometimes it's about knowing when you've already said enough. For Russell Westbrook, the final chapter is officially closed. Russell Westbrook is the Oklahoma City Thunder's all-time leader in points, assists, rebounds, and steals. All four major statistical categories belong to him. And this is a franchise that won a championship without him. 2 years later, his name is still sitting at the top of practically every important list in Thunder history. So how does a player with that kind of resume go from being one of the biggest stars in the NBA to receiving only a couple of offers before deciding to retire? The answer is complicated, and it really comes down to three completely different chapters of his career. The first chapter was loyalty. In 2016, Kevin Durant left Oklahoma City for Golden State, and almost everyone expected Westbrook to demand a trade. Instead, Russ stayed. He signed an extension when the franchise was at one of its most vulnerable moments, and rather than running from the situation, he committed to Oklahoma City. He even helped recruit Paul George to the team. That loyalty is a huge reason why Thunder fans never completely turned against him. When Westbrook returned to Oklahoma City in 2020 wearing a Houston Rockets jersey, the organization showed him a tribute video, and the arena erupted. Even after everything that happened, the connection between Russ and that city was still there. Westbrook was always going to be polarizing, but in Oklahoma City, he was their guy. Then came Chapter 2, the fall. After Houston, Westbrook moved to Washington, then the Lakers, Clippers, Denver, and eventually Sacramento. 7 teams in the final 7 seasons of his career. But the Lakers season is where his reputation took the biggest hit. Los Angeles went 33-49, missed the playoffs, and Westbrook became one of the biggest targets of criticism in the entire league. Even his own home crowd turned against him. The same player who once looked unstoppable suddenly looked like he didn't fit anywhere, and the decline became impossible to ignore. Westbrook had gone from 4 Western Conference Finals appearances and a trip to the NBA Finals alongside Durant to never making it beyond the second round again after 2019. The narrative around him changed completely. Instead of being viewed as an explosive MVP, he became the veteran nobody knew how to build around. But then came Chapter 3. And this is the part of Westbrook's career that deserves far more respect. He rebuilt himself. Instead of continuing to chase the superstar role, he learned how to contribute differently. He received 6th Man of the Year votes for 3 straight seasons and eventually found a role that allowed him to impact games without needing the ball every possession. His final season in Sacramento showed that transformation clearly. At 37 years old, Westbrook averaged 15.2 points and 6.7 assists while starting 58 games. Even more surprisingly, he shot 33.8% from 3, his best three-point shooting season since his MVP campaign. In other words, he actually adjusted. He changed his game, accepted a different role, and proved he could still contribute. And yet, after doing all of that, the NBA still gave him only to reported opportunities that he didn't want. That leads to the bigger question: why did Westbrook actually retire? The answer may have less to do with Westbrook himself and more to do with the NBA's current financial environment. On the same day Westbrook announced his retirement, his agent, Jeff Schwartz, released a statement criticizing the current collective bargaining agreement. Schwartz isn't some random representative. He's the founder and CEO of Excel Sports Management and represents some of the biggest names in basketball. His client list includes Nikola Jokic, Kristaps Porzingis, Tyler Herro, and Kate Cunningham. And his message was basically this: the league is making it increasingly difficult for older veteran players to find opportunities because of the current CBA rules. That accusation becomes even more interesting when you look at Schwartz's other clients. Kevin Love, Kelly Olynyk, and Dwight Powell were also still unsigned. Love is a 5-time All-Star and an NBA champion, yet even someone with his resume was struggling to find a team. That suggests Westbrook's situation may not be an isolated case. And here's where the story gets even bigger. Schwartz wasn't blaming NBA owners or Commissioner Adam Silver. He pointed directly at the Players Union, the very organization designed to protect the players. The criticism centers around the NBA's new Second Apron system and the restrictions it places on teams. The idea behind the rules was to prevent the richest teams from simply spending their way to championships. But there have also been unintended consequences. Older veterans can become casualties because teams are more cautious about using valuable roster spots and salary flexibility on players who aren't considered part of their long-term core. What's especially interesting is that the Players Association has acknowledged some of these concerns itself. NBA Players Association Executive Director David Kelly said during Summer League that the union wasn't a fan of the Second Apron, didn't propose it, and believed it should have done a better job fighting against it. That changes the entire retirement conversation. Westbrook didn't necessarily retire because he was incapable of playing anymore. He may have retired because the opportunities available to him no longer match what he wanted from the final chapter of his career. After 18 seasons, an MVP, an unprecedented number of triple-doubles, and a resume that will eventually put him in the Hall of Fame, maybe Westbrook decided that chasing one more NBA contract wasn't worth compromising his standards. And honestly, there's something fitting about that. Russell Westbrook spent his entire career doing things his own way. His final decision was no different. The NBA may have been ready to give him another role, but Westbrook decided that if this was the end, he wanted the ending to happen on his terms. The most interesting part of Russell Westbrook's retirement might be what his agent said afterward. Jeff Schwartz didn't simply defend his client. He attacked the current NBA system, arguing that the new collective bargaining rules are making it harder for veteran players to find opportunities. And what makes that criticism so important is that the head of the Players Union has made similar comments. NBA Players Association Executive Director David Kelly has openly admitted that the union does not like the Second Apron, didn't propose it, and believes it went too far. He even said the system isn't good for fans, players, or coaches, while suggesting that owners are the ones who benefit the most from it. The union president, Fred VanVleet, has also indicated that the next round of CBA negotiations is already a major priority. So what exactly is happening here, and how could it have contributed to Westbrook walking away from basketball? To understand that, you have to understand the Second Apron. Before the current system, the luxury tax was relatively simple. Teams could spend above the salary threshold, and if they were willing to pay the penalties, they could keep spending. Wealthy owners could essentially buy more flexibility by paying more money. The Second Apron changed that philosophy completely. Instead of simply charging teams more, the NBA takes away tools. Teams that cross certain financial thresholds lose trade flexibility, salary exceptions, and other mechanisms that front offices traditionally use to build their rosters. Eventually, draft pick penalties can become part of the equation as well. The important difference is that money can't simply solve these problems anymore. Once a team crosses the line, there are basketball consequences that owners can't just pay their way out of, and that changes how teams think about roster construction. Front offices aren't only worried about superstar contracts anymore. They're worried about every single roster spot. A veteran on a minimum contract might seem harmless, but if that player pushes a team over an apron, the consequences can be much bigger than the value of that individual player. So teams become more conservative. They keep younger players on cheaper contracts, protect financial flexibility, and sometimes choose upside over experienced veterans. That's the environment Russell Westbrook entered at the end of his career. The numbers show just how tight the market became. This summer, there was reportedly not a single NBA team with traditional cap space. and the overwhelming majority of players under contract were returning to the same teams they played for the previous season. Only a small number of players actually changed teams through free agency. That's an incredibly limited market, especially for older veterans who aren't expected to be long-term building blocks. Westbrook wasn't entering a normal free agency period where teams could simply decide whether they liked his game. He was entering a market where flexibility itself had become extremely valuable. But there is a legitimate argument on the other side, and it's important to acknowledge it. The new system has accomplished part of what the league wanted. The NBA has seen more competitive balance, and the era of multiple superstars simply joining forces to create unstoppable teams has become much harder. In recent seasons, several different franchises have won championships, and teams like Oklahoma City have been able to build through young talent and smart drafting rather than simply buying stars. If the goal was to create more parity, the second apron has clearly played a role. The problem is that every system has a cost, and some of the cost is being paid by veteran players. Players in their mid-30s who can still contribute but aren't stars can become casualties of roster-building rules. They aren't necessarily bad players. Teams may simply decide that their experience isn't worth the financial restrictions that come with adding them. That's a major distinction, because it means a player's career can be affected by the financial structure of the league rather than just his ability on the court. Now, we should also be fair to Westbrook's agent. Schwartz isn't an unbiased observer. He's an agent, and agents make money when their clients sign contracts. Obviously, a league where veterans receive bigger deals would benefit him financially, but that doesn't automatically mean his argument is wrong. In fact, when the head of the players' union is publicly expressing many of the same concerns, it's difficult to dismiss the criticism entirely. That's also why I would change the comparison to Allen Iverson. When Iverson struggled to find an NBA opportunity late in his career, teams were essentially making a basketball decision. They looked at his age, his game, and his situation, and decided they didn't believe he could help them anymore. Westbrook's situation appears different. Teams reportedly wanted him, Sacramento wanted him back, and Washington had interest. The problem was that neither situation offered the kind of role Westbrook was willing to accept. And that's where I land after looking at the full story. I previously said nobody wanted Russell Westbrook, and that was wrong. Teams did call. The opportunities existed, but the offers weren't really for the Russell Westbrook we remember. They were limited veteran roles on teams with little immediate upside. Westbrook looked at those choices and decided that another season wasn't worth it. So maybe he didn't retire because he couldn't play anymore. Maybe he retired because the only version of the NBA that was available to him no longer made sense. And if that's true, the biggest question isn't simply whether Russell Westbrook retired. It's whether the NBA's new financial system helped push him toward that decision. That's the debate worth having.